Joining me in studio this morning, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dr. Aune Victor is in studio, as well as that is Philemon Nangolo. Dr. Victor is the education specialist at UNICEF, and the Deputy Director of Programs and Quality Assurance is Mr. Nangolo. Welcome to the show. It's very good to have you. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for having me.
Good, Doctor.
Thank you. Very well, and also happy to have you, me here.
Okay. Well, Dr. Victor, I'm going to start off with you. Now, we've already established that some of the regional consultations have taken place earlier during the year with relative stakeholders. And having you here, what is UNICEF's role?
Thank you and good morning, Namibia. UNICEF is a very good partner of the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture and of Government, and indeed the UN as a whole. So our role as UNICEF, we provided both technical and financial support for the regional consultations as well as for the upcoming conference that you've just mentioned. And through that, we have also hired a consultancy team, Zabalazo from South Africa, who's working very closely with the ministry. And indeed, we've been with them since the regional consultations, and they are going to go through also with the conference. And Zabalazo would also play a key role in supporting the ministry to produce the commitment, Namibia's commitment to the Transforming Education Summit that's going to be taking place in New York that you also mentioned, where Namibia, among all the other global leaders, have to commit to transform education for the better of the children of the world.
Of course. Mr. Nangolo, if we just backtrack to 2011 real quick, what would you say were some of the difficulties that were encountered that is at that conference in terms of programs and in terms of quality assurance? And looking forward to this one that we have scheduled for next week, how will this conference build on the recommendations from before?
Thank you very much. There were numerous challenges and difficulties encountered or highlighted during the 2011 conference on education. To start with, some of them was the curriculum could not address, our curriculum could not address the contemporary issues. And the ministry was directed at least to revise the curriculum for it to address the challenges, as I indicated, the ones that challenges that are facing Namibia currently. One of it was also that our teachers were either under or unqualified. And as a case in point, they could not at least, or that their teaching could affect quality of education outcome. There were so many, as I indicated. One of it could also be the teacher professional development, the policies that we have. Some of them are not actually implemented or accurately implemented. And the issue of the life skills, teachers that are not enough, and most of our teachers were not skillful. It was also identified that our school board members lacks the understanding of education, and as a case in point, they could not help those who are entrusted with the responsibility of leading the school. So what the Ministry of Education has done through the Directorate of Program Quality Assurance so far, in collaboration with the NIED, National Institution for the Development Programs, so has revised the curriculum for it to address the objectives enshrined in Sustainable Development Goal, and also helping the Namibian government to reach or realize its goal in Vision 2030. So there were so many issues that I have indicated. One of it that the government has come up with the policies, policies such as the sector policy on inclusive education that was introduced and implemented, at least to make sure that our education is made to be as inclusive as possible, We also came up with the capacity building program for our teachers and those who are leading schools, at least to make it more easier for them to manage and effectively lead the school. As I indicated at the onset, the life skill teachers were introduced and appointed, properly trained, and the life skill as a subject is being implemented. The issue of basic pre-vocational subjects was also highlighted, and as a ministry, we tried by all means to implement it. I just would like to indicate that the issue of the school board that could not help the school leadership. So the ministry came up with a program with the assistance of the UNICEF and Rosing Foundation, the program called Social Accountability and School Governance. That is developed specifically to help the school board members at least to have an in-depth understanding of what they are expected to do. To come to your question as to what is this conference is going to look at now, it's going to interrogate to what extent the Minister of Education has implemented the resolutions taken during the 2011 National Conference on Education.
Fantastic, sounding very positive there, Mr. Nangolo. As we proceed, we don't have much time left, about 5 minutes that I really want to get out the most from the both of you. Dr. Victor, I'm heading over to you. Let's talk about COVID-19. It's still on our lips. We're still talking about it, you know. How would you say has COVID-19, or the impact of COVID-19 been on regional education, recovery, and what are the main regional issues that we can sort of just unpack right now?
I think the impact of COVID-19 has really regressed access to education. If we look at what has happened, we've got many of our children, both nationally as well as regionally. When I say regionally, I'm looking at about the SADC region, or the African continent, where many of our children have dropped out of school. We are hearing of many of our children, especially the girl child, who have become pregnant. It's the same in Namibia. We had over 3,600 children, girls, who fell pregnant in Namibia alone. We hear of dropout. I spoke about dropout rates. We hear about psychosocial issues, not only affecting the children, but also the teachers. Many of them have lost either a colleague, or some of the children have lost their parents, or they've seen some of their caretakers who have been taken by COVID. And then also the issue of funding. So COVID has also really impacted on funding, because most of the resources that were supposed to go to education, for example, have now been reallocated to focus on addressing really the health issues of COVID. As a result, we've really seen that the gains that we have made as a country, as well as the region, as Africa, we have really basically regressed, which means that we are now struggling to attain the SDGs, and for Namibia, our Vision 2030. So the concern that we have, or the recovery that is coming now, that we need to look at is that we need to, that's why the UN came up with the Transforming Education Summit, which the region is indicating that even before COVID-19, we are already seeing an education crisis. And in fact, the World Bank is now calling it an education poverty, because we are seeing many of our children, especially those from poor families, from vulnerable communities, and even those with disabilities, who were negatively impacted during COVID. And as a result, some of them could not even study because of when their schools were closed for quite some time. Some of the countries were basically had closed their systems for an entire year. For example, I think was it a country in Eastern Africa, the whole year, kids didn't have school. And for us, fortunately, it was only about 3 months, but it's still a lot. So we need to look at how do we recover what we have lost. That's why now the UN is looking at how do we come up with some aggressive policies to transform education in the short, medium, and long term, and also to see how can we really get to attain the SDG goals that we as a global community has said we'd like to see our children in school, learning, surviving, and then thriving.
Absolutely. Mr. Nangolo, still staying on COVID-19, how would you say has the educational setting been affected, and can we anticipate that this will also be a topic that will come up during the conference next week?
Yeah, the COVID has affected education also negatively, like what Dr. Aune has indicated, that most of our children fall pregnant. Our statistic indicates that over more than 3,000 girls became pregnant just when we closed schools, and some of them have dropped. So what the conference will then look at, as I indicated, it will also look at what is that have worked well with us, and what is that we still need to do, and perhaps to craft the strategies on the way forward, at least to make us thinking outside the box.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk about the theme a little bit and hear from the both of you, and I just want to get it right now. The theme for this year is transforming education towards inclusion and quality in the context of global changes, re-imaging 2023 and beyond. And there seems to be some, if we highlighted a few words, if we talk about transforming, inclusion, quality, globally re-imaging, how does this theme speak to the conference from the both of you, starting with you, Doctor?
Again, the theme is really looking at the issue of, we've been talking about reforms, which Mr. Nangolo also mentioned, but we have to go beyond reform and to look at transforming. So when you talk about transforming, it's really that, as he indicated, we need to think about outside the box, we need to be aggressive, we need to be strategic and think, what can we do differently that is going to transform the education system. Now, when you talk about transform, is that you want to see really some radical changes. And with the conference, the theme was really chosen also looking into what is now happening at the global level in terms of the Transforming Education Summit, where the heads of state have to make basically a commitment and to say, in my country, by 2030, I want to do A, B, C, D for me to see changes in education, changes in terms of quality, changes in terms of access, changes in terms of safety and protection. We are really faced with the challenges where many of our children are not even attending school because of issues of safety. To the school, home, and even within the community. So how do we make sure that for the child to learn, we have to ensure that they are really in those inclusive, protective, conducive learning environments. So transforming education would now look at all the aspects related to addressing the child. What do we need to do to make sure that this child is learning in school and learning? We hear that there are children who are in school sitting in desks, but they are not learning. Just to give an example where research was conducted, where we are seeing the 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, who cannot read and comprehend a basic paragraph. So we need to look at how can we make sure that this 10-year-old can be analytical, can read, understand, and analyze what he or she is reading. So basically, transforming education is going to look at all of those things to make sure that we are producing our future generation who's going to be competing in the global world.
Absolutely. So how about you, Mr. Nangolo? You want to touch on that?
Yeah, in a nutshell, as I indicated, the onset, the conference of the 2011 made the resolutions that was given to the Ministry of Education, especially the directorate that I'm representing, to implement. The purpose was to at least see to it that we are transforming education. Therefore, this conference now, as I indicated at the onset, will look at what is that has been implemented and what is that we have been achieved with regard to transforming of education, and what is that did not work very well. And as I said at the onset, craft the strategies at least to address some of the areas that the resolutions were not accurately and effectively implemented. So that is the focal point of this conference.
Okay. Dr. Victor, as we wrap up this conversation, what would you like to leave the Namibian audience with?
I think for me, I would like to request all the Namibians to really take education as a shared responsibility. The ministry's motto is that quality education is a shared responsibility. And at the conference, just as at the regional consultations, we really are looking at everybody to take part and to be objective in providing recommendations to the ministry or to the government to make sure that by 2030, Namibian children are really prepared to be future citizens who can contribute and compete globally.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Nangolo, Dr. Victor, thank you so much for coming
Thank
through.
you.
All the best next week for the conference.
Thank you.
Okay, there you have it. We are still on about the second National Conference on Education that is slated to take place next week. And so much has come from this conversation from Dr. Aune Victor, who is an education specialist at the UNICEF and also the Deputy Director of Programs and Quality Assurance at the Ministry, Mr. Philemon Nangolo. So transformation is a very, very big word that came out here. As you've heard, some of the issues that came up in 2011 pertain to curriculum challenges. Some teachers, for example, are either underqualified or unqualified. And now, a few years later, over 600 delegates are meeting next week. And let's see what new recommendations and what can come from this event. We do continue after the very short break.